and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. As Serbia grapples with a growing crisis around media freedom and government control, the challenges facing independent journalism are becoming more severe. Now, public broadcasters are increasingly seen as government tools, and citizens' trust in mainstream media continues to diminish. With threats against journalists rising and press freedom under constant pressure, the future of independent reporting in the country looks uncertain. Now, joining me now to discuss these pressing issues further and the unfolding situation is Rasto Kuzel, director at Memo 98. Rasto, thank you so much for being with us here on TVP World this evening.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So let's begin with this. I mean, how does Serbia, let's start with Serbia here for a moment. How would you say that Serbia compares to other Central and Eastern European countries when it comes to media freedom and government influence? I mean, would you say that they're truly independent, or are they actually tools of the government?
Well, I would say that at this stage, they are far from being independent. I should say that I had the opportunity to work in Serbia on numerous occasions in the past. And I've been basically following the developments in the country, for example, in the context of the recent protests. And one can really see the level of influence that the current government has over the media, and as you mentioned, the sort of fact that specifically the publicly funded media really became propaganda tools for the current government, for the current president. So I think the media situation has really deteriorated in the recent years.
What about Slovakia?
I mean, in Slovakia, specifically since 2023, since Robert Fico came to power and became the prime minister for the fourth time, he basically did very similar moves, especially when it comes to sort of changing the publicly funded broadcaster, RTVS, into a sort of newly established SCVR broadcaster, while there was no real reason for this change. The only sort of reason was to sort of have political leverage over the public broadcaster. But due to problems with his ruling coalition, the incumbent ruling coalition was not even able to sort of appoint a director, was not able to appoint the controlling organ. So they destroyed a relatively functioning previous broadcaster, but they were not able to establish a new one, which would be, let's say, independent or critical of the government.
Let me ask you this. Why would you say that the European Union or Western media are a little reluctant to talk about the situation that's unfolding in Serbia, for instance?
I mean, obviously, it has perhaps two aspects. I mean, one is related to the way how European politicians basically react to the protests. And here, I completely agree with you that there were only some groups in the parliament, such as Socialists and Democrats, Greens, or Renew Europe, that basically issued statements basically criticizing the violence against students. But we have not really seen higher level EU officials making similar statements. The enlargement chief, Mr. Kopman, did not even mention the protest during his visit Serbia. So indeed, this is sort of quite interesting that we don't hear such statements. The other aspect maybe is related to the EU media coverage of the protests, and there I think especially since the resignation of Serbian Prime Minister Miloš Vučević, I think it has picked up. And while at the beginning perhaps it was more reluctant, but now I think we see bigger outlets such as BBC, The Guardian, Euronews providing more increased coverage of the situation in Serbia.
Rasto, let me ask you this. I mean, you talked about protests here. Let's talk a little bit about public trust in the media. I mean, people are protesting. How would you say that these ordinary citizens, I mean, in Serbia and Slovakia, perceive their media? I mean, would you say there's a growing skepticism towards mainstream outlets? And I mean, what about the impact that it's going to have on democracy?
Well, this is a very good question, and here I would like to mention the very irresponsible behavior from politicians, from particularly populist politicians such as Prime Minister Fico or President Vučić, that have been constantly undermining the sort of trust vis-a-vis the publicly funded media or private media, labeling them as anti-state or anti-government outlets, and therefore sending this very bad signal to citizens, that these are enemies and you should not trust them, and so therefore it's obviously a little bit more difficult than for the mainstream media to be able to play the role. And of course, at the same time, we do have obviously the sort of impact of social media, where many of these politicians basically moved and they avoid the usual filter of mainstream media and just use social media, where they could basically present their opinions unopposed, and really not fact-checked.
Let me ask you this: to what extent does foreign media play in? Foreign actors like China or Russia play an interference in shaping the media landscape and interfering in Serbia and Slovakia? What do we know about this?
Well, I was able to actually participate in some monitoring projects looking into the foreign interference or influence in Serbia, and there I think there are very strong signals that both Russia and China do have quite good positions, when it comes to not only influencing but actually even having their own sort of media inside the country, whereas this type of influence is a little bit different in Slovakia. I mean, in Slovakia, it is usually done through certain actors, and this is mostly done through social media. So the disinformation actors who are basically based in Slovakia are basically Slovak, are used to sort of pursue this pro-Kremlin narrative. So it's very different, but in result of this, I mean, we see that when we look at the surveys or sociological studies, we see that both countries are very much affected by this pro-Russian or to some extent pro-Chinese influence in both countries.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Rasto Kuzel, director at Memo 98, for breaking it down for us. Thanks so much for being with us here on World Talks.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. Don't go away. Up next, news. Don Arleth.